For more, we are joined by Anupam Chandra, as a professor of law and technology at Georgetown University Law Center. Professor, thank you very much for your time. But firstly, so we understand that the House has passed the TikTok ban bill, but its Senate path looks unclear for now. Why is it facing more opposition on the Senate floor, and what are the odds of it eventually passing the Senate?
So right now it's anyone's guess. No one really knows what the Senate will do. You need 60 votes in the Senate to pass a measure because it allows for a minority to basically block the measure. And so we are not yet certain as to whether the Senate will pass it. If the Senate passes, President Biden has already indicated that he will sign the bill. So this will also put pressure on Democrats to pass the legislation. So I think it's going to be, and what we saw in the House is that it was a lot of Republicans who were very supportive of the bill, and most Democrats were, but at a lower rate than the Republicans.
Professor, assuming this goes through, what is then the likelihood of China approving any sale of TikTok, or ByteDance allowing, the full or partial divestment of its assets? And what legal tools could TikTok use to prevent this forced sale?
Right. Well, when President Trump tried to ban TikTok in 2020, he relied upon authorities, earlier statutes, and the courts said, no, you didn't have the power under those statutes to enter into such a ban. Also, WeChat users sued because they felt that their First Amendment or free speech rights were being impinged by the ban on WeChat that was instituted simultaneously with the ban on TikTok in 2020. And the courts were receptive to that argument in 2020. So I think we're going to see TikTok and its users filing lawsuits, mostly based on the First Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Professor, some critics wonder, couldn't there be a better way to address these various concerns rather than just using a bill like this? My question to you is, to what extent do you think the support for banning TikTok is a reflection of genuine national security concerns versus being a political tactic?
So I think it's hard to know. The Republicans and the Democrats supporting the measure say that the app could be used for surveillance by China and also for propaganda by China. And so that's the claim. But these are theoretical claims. And so right now, the government's argument is really could or can or may, and not has or has shown a proclivity towards doing, and so this speculative action based on these kind of conjectures about national security are going to be tested by the courts. The courts are going to demand a kind of serious explanation of why the national security concerns override the clear free speech impediments by such a move. Imagine if the United States government said to a publisher of any particular service, hey, you have to sell, we need a new publisher. That changes the character of the publication itself, which I think raises significant free speech issues.
Professor, in the event that ByteDance does sell its stake in TikTok, how likely is it to be picked up by another competitor, given all the antitrust hurdles that it has to go through? Not to mention, anyone who wants to buy TikTok must also have very deep pockets. Estimates value the app at about $50 billion. The chances that it could go to a rival like Meta then, and also really how badly does TikTok need the US?
Great questions, Elizabeth. The problems with a rival like Facebook or Google buying this app are exactly the antitrust problems that you already described. Microsoft had indicated its earlier interest in 2020, but then Oracle emerged as a possible buyer in 2020, alongside Walmart, of all things. And so you might see a coalition of companies that pool together the many, many billions to buy this app. By the way, 50 billion was the number that was mentioned in 2020. I think it may be multiples of that today. So it's definitely going to require a very well-heeled buyer or a consortium of buyers that could be American. The law doesn't require that they be American. It could be just as long as they're not essentially Chinese or Russian would be the countries of origin that would be barred.
And Professor, we know that so many young people are using this. It's a crucial demographic going into the presidential elections in 8 months' time in November. How do you expect the younger generation to respond to this? And could it have much impact on how they vote?
So I do think that this is going to agitate many people on TikTok. You already have seen the congressional switchboards going into overdrive with people calling in to say that this app shouldn't be banned. And I think many young people who've used the app realize that they can say things that are pro-China or anti-China, pro-America or anti-America, and they will find an audience for their speech. So I think most people using the app don't really fear that their activity on the app can be weaponized against them or the United States. And I think that's largely right. This seems to me an odd focus of national security activity. If the app is clearly pushing Chinese communist propaganda, then I think we can witness that. We'll see it. And we should call it out, certainly, if we're pushing any agenda that seems problematic. But I don't think it's a clear national security threat in its current guise.
And Professor, China called it a bullying behavior by the U.S. and it warned that this will inevitably come back to bite the U.S. itself. What's the possibility of Beijing retaliating by targeting American business interests on its soil or taking other measures that further inflame the situation?
So China, of course, began this process decades ago by banning American apps that provide information like Facebook and Twitter and Wikipedia even. So China is in an odd position to complain about any bans. However, they will be able to take additional measures because there are lots of American companies that, as you know, do business in China still that are welcome in China. And these companies are collecting huge amounts of data. If an app on your phone is too dangerous to be owned by a foreign adversary, then what about the phone itself? Because Apple makes phones that are sold widely in China, and Apple earns 19% or almost 20% of its income in China and Taiwan. And so I think there's a lot of if I were an American company doing business in China, I would be concerned about possible blowback.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time. Anupam Chandra, Professor of Law and Technology at Georgetown University Law Center.